Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 811B, and today's date is November 6, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Using Terror on the People of Russia to Push the Russian Government Out of Syria. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. The interview with James Wesley Rawls has been uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight channel. If you're on YouTube, just type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video. If you'd like to see it on the X22report.com site, go right to the homepage, scroll down a little bit, you'll see it on the right-hand side. Or you can see the video on the news site, which is newssentinel.com. That's NEWZSENTINEL.com. You can see it on there. We are streaming 263 streams from news sites all around the world, which includes print and video, bringing it to one location. And this site is updated every single minute. Every time there's a news story that's out there, it is updated right on the site. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, watchdog groups are entitled to all federal records, and this goes back to the 1978 Inspector General Act, already entitles watchdog groups to all agency records. And it seems that the federal watchdogs are urging Congress to make sure all inspector generals, not just those at the Department of Justice, have unfettered access to all official documents. Because what they're seeing is that some of these documents are not being handed over to them. They're saying, no, we're not going to hand this over to you. No, you don't have the right to have this. And they're saying, yes, if we refer back to the 1978 Inspector General Act, you need to hand this over. Now, again, if they're not handing something over, that means they're hiding something. That means they don't want them to see something. And they're not abiding by the legislation. And it looks like these watchdog groups are saying to Congress, listen, you need to write new legislation to let everyone know that we do have the right to look at these documents, which is absolutely ridiculous. And it seems like that's all we do here in the United States government, is we continually write more and more legislation, even though we have legislation on the books, and all we need to do is follow that legislation. So one additional legislation pointing to that one doesn't really do anything. It's almost like the people's rights. All we have to do is point back to it and say, no, this is it right here. We don't need 27,000 other laws telling us what one right already tells us, or what one law already tells us. Now, we know the United States government continually pushes the hoax that there's terror all around us and we should be scared, and they need to pat us down, they need to violate our rights. And a report leaked this past summer says that the TSA agents fail to identify bombs and weapons 95% of the time. And they completely miss everything when they were tested. I mean, they missed someone walking in with a bomb taped to their back, and they failed to find it. This is how bad it is, and this is how you know this is completely fake, phony, and false. And now, with the new evidence coming out that the Islamic State is really a proxy army for the United States government, and that the CIA created Al-Qaeda, that all these videos that the Islamic State has been putting out, is really a production of the United States terror campaign, we know it's completely fake. All this was driven by the United States government central bankers to keep us in fear and to give up our rights. And Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying the war on terror is a complete hoax. The Americans were deceived by our government employees, by the central bank, and the consequences for Americans are an aborted constitution. We live in a police spy state. And because of this, resentment and hatred of Americans around the world is growing because of what the U.S. government central bankers are doing around the world. Now, out in Afghanistan, the Doctors Without Borders, they are out there saying, listen, when people were fleeing from the hospital, the plane, the U.S. plane, was shooting at those people as they tried to get away. I mean, this is a war crime. The U.S. knew it was a hospital. They knew the Doctors Without Borders were in there. There was a tarp banner on top of the roof signifying this. They also gave the GPS location to Afghanistan officials and the U.S. government, and they knew perfectly well that this was a hospital and there were no other buildings around it, and there were never any combatants found in this hospital. So this is a war crime, but Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing in Yemen. But of course, the U.S. government is switching this off and trying to blame Russia for bombing a hospital that didn't even exist in the area they were trying to blame them in. Now, Ukraine is going to be receiving a $1 billion loan guarantee from the United States. This will be the third one right now. Spreading the debt, you know, Ukraine cannot pay this back whatsoever. The crisis in Libya is continually getting worse. And we come to find that the Federal Reserve has been funding the Islamic State, and an Islamic State leader in Pakistan just admitted it. So it is very interesting to hear that billions of American dollars are ending up in the hands of the Islamic State directly from the Federal Reserve. Originally, the Federal Reserve estimated the Islamic State funding as an expensive mistake of around $3 billion. But guess what? It really was about $13.2 billion to fund this terrorist group. So right now, they're shutting down the funds in Iraq. This is where it was being siphoned off. And we know they were funding the Islamic State group. It is the proxy army. We know they were using the drug money from Afghanistan when they were sold the poppies as opium across the world. They were using the oil revenue that they took from Syria to pay for their operations and to pay for the paid mercenaries. Remember, there was like 30,000+ paid mercenaries. That is a huge payroll that they have to pay each time. And we can see right now, this was all being done to prop up the system. Invade a country, replace the government. This is what they've been doing to keep this system alive. But the system is dying no matter any way you look at it. They will not be able to spread this debt further and further. There will come a point where it won't matter, and we are this close from that point. Now, the Syrian army, they made huge gains in Syria. They took back Aleppo. The army, in collaboration with the civil defense forces, managed to open the way to Aleppo to ensure safe passage of this important route. The Islamic State, the proxy army of the United States government, has fallen back to Raqqa. And right now we know a lot of the Islamic State forces are being airlifted out by the U.S., Turkey, Qatar to Yemen. And of course the United States is out there continually blaming everything on Russia, saying that everything they're doing is not working and they're actually hitting civilians, hospitals, and the Free Syrian Army. And we know the Free Syrian Army really doesn't exist. They're really Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State. And they just made up the word Free Syrian Army or the Free Democratic Army, whatever term they want to use. They just keep rebranding it. It makes no difference at this point. We know it's all terrorists. We know it's all paid mercenaries right now. Now, the OPCW has found that, yes, there were chemical weapons used inside of Syria, but guess what? It was coming from the rebels and the Islamic State, not the Syrian government. They were using mustard gas, and remember that Syria got rid of their chemical weapon stockpile 18 months ago. And included in this was the sulfur mustard gas. So guess what? Syria didn't use this. And we knew for a very long time it was the rebels, the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda. They're all one and the same. They're all terrorists being paid by the United States government and the coalition forces to go in to Syria, hurt the people, kill the people, make them suffer so they would remove Assad. And it's not working. at all. Now, the US and UK, they are pushing propaganda as hard as they possibly can. We know the US said they saw a flash on the Metrojet from their satellite data. It's amazing how fast they can come up with this. And now the flash could be anything. It could be an engine blowing up. It could be, anything that could have happened. It doesn't mean it's a bomb just because you see a flash. But the US and UK saying that they have information. The UK says they have intel, but they won't give it to Russia. They said, no, we don't have to give it to you. You'll just have to believe us. Well, I'm sorry. I'm that type of person that needs proof too. And if you're going to say something, you need to back it up. But they're saying they heard their proxy armies, the Islamic State, and they intercepted communications from them. And this is how they know they're the ones who blew up the plane. Now, if there was a bomb, we know this was planned by the United States government and the coalition forces. Why would they do this? Well, think about it. They put a bomb on a plane. They blow up the plane, and they use the propaganda of the Islamic State. Now, terror worked here in the United States. They're hoping that this terror of the Islamic State is going to work on the Russian people. Like I said way back in my reports, the U.S., the coalition forces, the central bankers, are sending a message. We can take down a plane. And this is terror. And they're hoping that the people of Russia are so scared that they put pressure on their government to get out of Syria, because what they're trying to do right now is saying that since Russia went into Syria, the act of destroying the Islamic State brought this on. And if we remove our forces from Syria, this will go away. They're trying to make the people of Russia scared, just like they did to the people of the United States. And I'm talking about the United States government central bankers, where they used 9/11, the Boston bombing, and many other false flags to scare us into doing things you normally wouldn't do. And they're trying to do this with the Russian people. Now, Putin decided to suspend all Russian flights to Egypt on Friday. And this is coming from a recommendation by his chief of intelligence, until they can really look at the evidence and find out what really happened. Now, this is not going to, if you're believing the official story from the U.S. government central bankers in the U.K., and the Islamic State did take down the plane, do you really think this is the only place they would do it? So it really makes no sense to stop all flights to Egypt. And if we take this a step further, if this is such a threat, and the Islamic State is a threat, and the United States government is going with that story that we have nothing to do with them, they're a terrorist group, why hasn't the U.S. stopped the flights to Egypt? Because what we're seeing here is a propaganda tactic. They're using them on Russia to convince them. Now, there is information out there coming out of France saying that the cockpit voice recorder, the CVR, of the Russian plane that crashed in Egypt, on it, they're saying they heard an explosion. Now, remember, when you hear an explosion, it doesn't mean it's a bomb, but they put it out there that confirmed they heard some noise. And of course, they're saying it's an explosion. And of course, everyone always goes to a bomb. But if an engine blew up, it's not a bomb, but there would be an explosion. If there was a crack in the fuselage and pieces blew off and hit something, there could have been an explosion. But they're using these terms to convince everyone that it was a bomb. And so far, they haven't finished with their investigation. They're looking through everything still. They really haven't found any bomb residue on any of the individuals, but they're not finished, so Maybe there are some with, but we'll have to wait and see. And this whole thing is being ginned up to basically try to get Russia out of Syria. Will this tactic work? I don't think so. I think the Russian government, if it does come out that it was a bomb, they will hit the Islamic State even harder than they did before. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.